everyone, welcome back to Biology with Ms. Vukovic and Mr. Sindelar. This week we are going to apply everything that we've learned about populations, about biodiversity, and survival rates and genetics, all of those really amazing things that we've learned, and we're going to apply it to a population of wolves on an island in Michigan. And that island is called Isle Royale, and the wolf population there has been studied for 50 years. So we're going to be scientists this week and really examine that population. So 2 things I want you guys to be able to do this week are describe a population of wolves in Michigan and use scientific observations to predict what will happen next to that population of wolves. So really, you're just going to describe the population, and then you're going to try to guess what might happen next to that population of wolves. So, to get started, this week we are looking at a population of wolves in Michigan. And I don't know about you all, but I have never been to this national park. But there's a national park called Isle Royale, and Isle really just means island. So Isle really just means island. They just think they're fancy. This is the area of land that we are going to be looking at to describe our population. So when we talk about a wolf population this week, we're not going to be talking about all the wolves in all of the world. We're talking about only the wolves on this island. So like I said, we're going to be looking into a population of wolves on an island in Michigan. That population of wolves are called gray wolves, or timber wolves are what some people might have been calling them. And as far as we know, those timber wolves or gray wolves are the toughest predator on this island in Michigan. And they've been that way since their arrival to the island in the 1940s. So for a very long time, these wolves have lived on that island, being the toughest types of predators. Scientists think that those wolves got to the island based on an ice bridge that formed between the island and Canada during 1948. If you look at the map to the right, notice that this is the island. So what they think happened is this ice bridge formed between Canada and the island, and a bunch of wolves just traveled there. Of course, we all know that winter ends and that bridge that was formed out of ice melted. So once those wolves got there, they were stuck on that island and their population changed because of their seclusion, or the fact that they're just like stranded on that island. Another really weird fact that I've been thinking about when I look at this picture is this island is way closer to Canada than it is Michigan, but it's still considered a Michigan territory and it's still considered a part of the U.S. Like I mentioned before, these gray wolves or timber wolves of Michigan are some of the toughest predators on that island. A single wolf itself can hunt small things like hare, which are like rabbits, or beavers. But normally what happens is the wolves will live in packs of 4 to 8, and they're going to work together to hunt large prey like moose. So what might happen is a single wolf can eat its own prey or hunt its own small prey, but together they're able to take down large prey like these giant moose. We know all of these observations about gray wolves because scientists like you and biologists like you have been observing these wolves for 50 years. So since those wolves got to that island, scientists have been trying to pay attention to the population because they're really just stranded and there's no way for those wolves to leave unless by some crazy happenstance they hop on a boat or they have an ice bridge form again. But most likely that's not going to happen. So biologists keep studying these wolves. And one of the main reasons that they study these wolves is because they want to examine how their population size is going to change since they're on an island. So since they arrived in 1940s, the population of wolves has changed. It started at 50 animals or 50 wolves on the island in 1980. And now, back in 2016, there were only 2 wolves on the island. So if you look to the right, here's a breakdown of how the number of wolves on the island has changed. And this isn't because people were bringing wolves to the island. This is just happening naturally. So they noticed that it starts at 50 and it drops all the way to 15 in 10 years. It spikes again and then it drops again. So big number, little number, big number, little number. This year is 2020 and it marks another 10-year benchmark or 10-year time frame to look at this wolf population. And what I want you guys to do this week is try to think about, what do you actually think the population will be? And I'm going to give you some background information. So now it's your turn to be the biologist. I'm going to give you some background information as to why scientists think that the population had gone from 15 to 30 to 18. And I want you guys to think about, if this is 2020, what might that wolf population be this year? And what's going to happen to that wolf population in the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to get bigger? Do you think that it's going to get smaller again? And we're going to base these observations on 2 biological terms that we've learned in the last few weeks. So the 2 terms that we're going to pay attention to are genetic variation and food sources. In the past 50 years, scientists have made 2 really great observations. The first is genetic variation. Really, scientists believe that one reason the wolf population decreased is because of genetic mutations. They figure that because all of these wolves are on the same island, what's happening is that wolves of the same family are breeding together and reproducing. And that's going to cause mutations that lead to a lower survival rate of the population. So one observation they made is because the population is stranded on the island, they're reproducing in the family and mutations are happening that lead to death. So they can't reproduce like viable, or they can't reproduce babies that are going to live for a really long time. So these genetic mutations are one of the main reasons they think that the wolf population changes so much. Another reason or another observation that scientists have made about the wolf population on the island in Michigan is that their food source changes as well as their population rate. And so scientists found that the population of wolves is going to increase when they have lots of food to eat. We all know that the wolves eat moose. And so if the wolves want to live, the island is going to need lots of moose or meese in order for the wolf population to increase. So remember when we talked about if I eat all my snacks in one day, then I don't have the option to eat snacks for the rest of the week? Well, that's the same for the wolves. If the wolves eat all of their food or all the moose, then they're not going to be able to survive because they're not going to have any more food. So for wolves on the island in Michigan, their population numbers changed so much because they have these genetic variations or these mutations that lead them to death. And also the food source or their food supply, which are the moose on the island, that number changes a lot too. And sometimes they overeat. So if they overeat all the moose on the island, that wolf population isn't going to have any more food, and they can't just go run to the grocery store and get more. So scientists made those observations of mutations that lead to death and moose population as a food source. And they realized that if those two things happen in a negative way, well, then the wolves aren't going to be able to live. If it's more favorable, then the wolves can live. And right now, last year on the island in Michigan, scientists reported that there are 15 wolves on that island. They also noted that the food availability, so the number of moose on the island, is 2,000. So there are 15 wolves, and there are 2,000 moose. That's a lot of food for those wolves to eat. Another interesting thing that's been happening is that scientists wanted to try to limit the number of mutations that happen from inbreeding. So they brought new wolves to the island. So they tried to bring different families of wolves to the island so that they could reproduce. So, my friends, based on all this information, based on what you've learned about the wolves, what I want you to do is go to the Google Doc and let me know if you think the wolf population will grow in the next years based on their food availability, which is the 2,000 moose, and the new population variation from new wolves being brought to the island. Think about it, and I can't wait to hear your responses. Last thing, if you get to this video before Tuesday, we are having a video call on Google Hangouts, and I'm going to post the link to it. It's going to be Tuesday, April 28th at 1 p.m. And I really hope that you all can join us. I can't wait to hear from you and see how your lives have been in these last 6 weeks. As always, email myself or Mr. Sindelar if you have any questions. And have a great week.